Today we are going to discuss or carry out a critical analysis of the performance of the International Monetary Fund. The performance of the International Monetary Fund can be subject to various critical analyses. Here are some key aspects that critics often focus on. Number one, conditionality and structural adjustment programs. One common criticism of the IMF is related to the conditionality attached to its loans and the implementation of SAPs. Critics argue that stringent economic policy reforms required by the IMF can lead to negative social impacts, including austerity measures, reduced public spending on health and education, and thus increased poverty and inequality. Democracy and governance. Some critics argue that the IMF's decision-making processes disproportionately favors major economies, in other words, the largest contributors to IMF, particularly the United States and European countries, which can result in policies that reflect the interests of these powerful nations rather than the needs of the borrowing countries. Then is the neoliberal economic policies. The IMF has been associated with the promotion of neoliberal economic policies such as deregulation, privatization, and trade liberalization. Critics argue that these policies can undermine national sovereignty, exacerbate inequality, and create economic vulnerabilities, particularly in developing countries. Coming to the social and environmental impacts, the IMF's focus on economic stabilization and debt repayment sometimes overlooks the social and environmental consequences of its programs. Critics argue that the IMF should prioritize social spending, poverty reduction, and sustainable development to ensure that its policies do not harm vulnerable populations or exacerbate environmental degradation. Then is the role in financial crisis. The IMF's response to financial crisis has drawn criticism in past. Critics argue that the organization's emphasis on austerity measures during crisis can worsen economic downturns and social hardships. It's important to note that while these criticisms exist, the IMF has also made efforts to address some of these concerns over time. To what extent the IMF really helped the developing countries in the past, and it is helping at the moment as well. Here are some of the key contributions and ways in which the IMF helps countries. Number one, financial assistance. This assistance helps countries address the balance of payment difficulties, stabilize their economies, and implement necessary reforms. The IMF offers various types of financial support, including standby arrangements, extended fund facilities, and rapid financing instruments. Number two, advice and technical assistance. The IMF provides policy advice and technical assistance to member countries to help them design and implement effective economic and monetary policies. The IMF works closely with countries to assess their economic challenges, develop strategies, and provide recommendations on fiscal, monetary, and structural reforms. Then is the crisis prevention and surveillance. The IMF conducts regularly economic surveillance and monitoring of its member countries to identify vulnerabilities and potential risks. By providing early warning and policy recommendations, the IMF aims to prevent crises or mitigate their severity. Capacity building. The IMF supports capacity building efforts in member countries to strengthen their institutions and policy making capabilities. This assistance includes training programs, workshops, technical expertise, and knowledge sharing on various aspects of economic management, governance, financial sector regulation, and statistical methodologies. Then is the debt restructuring and debt sustainability analysis. In case where countries face significant debt burdens, the IMF assists in debt restructuring negotiations and provides guidance on debt sustainability. Then is the global economic stability and cooperation. As a global institution, the IMF promotes international economic stability and cooperation. It fosters dialogue among countries, encourages policy coordination, and provides a platform for discussing global economic challenges. Overall, the IMF's assistance is intended to provide countries with the tools and support needed to overcome economic difficulties, stabilize their economies, and create a foundation for sustainable growth and development. Notable examples of the countries which have been benefited, which have been bailed out by the IMF in the past. Here are some notable examples of countries that have received IMF bailouts in the past. Number 1. Greece. Greece received multiple bailout packages from the IMF along with the European Central Bank and the European Commission during the European sovereign debt crisis starting in 2010. Number 2 case is the Argentina. Argentina has sought IMF assistance on multiple occasions. More recently, in 2018, Argentina secured a record $57 billion bailout package from the IMF to stabilize its economy and address currency volatility. Then is the Ukraine. Ukraine received financial assistance from the IMF following the political and economic turmoil in 2014. Number 4 is the Iceland. In the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, Iceland faced a severe banking and economic collapse. The IMF provided financial assistance to support the country's recovery efforts and stabilize its financial system. Pakistan. Pakistan has had several IMF bailout programs throughout its history. In recent years, the country received a significant bailout package in 2019 to address its balance of payment difficulties and implement structural reforms. Then is the Mexico. Mexico faced a financial crisis in 1994. The IMF provided a bailout package to support Mexico's economy and restore investor confidence. South Korea. South Korea received a bailout from the IMF during the Asian financial crisis in the late 1990s. These examples highlight some of the countries that have received IMF bailouts in the past. However, it is important to note that many other countries have also received IMF assistance, including countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America during various economic crises or periods of financial instability. The terms and conditions of IMF bailouts vary depending on the specific circumstances of each country and the programs negotiated between the IMF and the borrowing governments. I hope these few lines or this review of the IMF will go a long way in helping you to understand what is the IMF and what is strategy and the policy or the contribution at the global level. Thank you very much. God bless you.